Joe, hey, here we are. I know last show we were talking about kind of school starting, and now it's going to be the first weekend of school. So, did when you were in school, under education, right, lower education as opposed to college education, like what were some of the traditions that maybe you did as a family? I know you're a basketball player. What was like a Friday or a Saturday night at the Topinka family when it comes to food? With you being an athlete, I know you're 6'7". I got to imagine you got to get in there before Joe does.
Well, I remember the dinner table was always a fun experience because there were nine of us, including my mom and dad, so seven kids and plus the parents. And I don't know how my mom did it, with all those kids. And my mom and dad both worked. And I remember the stack of bread was like, a foot and a half high. And as soon as we'd sit down to the table and as soon as we were allowed to eat, that stack would disappear into nothing within, 20 seconds. So I remember my dad barbecued back in the day. It was a lot of fun having burgers or hot dogs or whatever. But those were the fun events. My family was great because they, like I'm sure yours, Mike, they followed you around to all your events, chasing you from one place to another. So it was a blast.
Yeah, same thing. Both parents worked and both were sales and entrepreneur. My mom's a residential realtor, so she had a pretty flexible schedule to kind of get things done. But the weekend, with sports and everything, Friday was my mom's night off, and we were usually having some sort of local pizza that was in the area because we were sports, and again, teenagers and stuff like that, with me and my brother playing sports. I think she said she was buying milk like every day practically. Pizza would be pretty gone pretty fast. But those are the good times that I remember in the fall. And football season. I played football, but growing up in Columbus, Ohio, we've got a Buckeye today here on the show. So I've got,
Oh.
for some selfish reasons, maybe we'll talk a little about a bit about Buckeye football now that it's on hiatus. But who do we have on the show for today?
Well, we're really fortunate to have Jim Foley here, who's the Chief Technology Officer at Joe Gibbs Racing. And Jim's been at Joe Gibbs Racing just coming up on 8 years. He spent his career in racing in one form or another. We'll give Jim an opportunity to kind of recap, but he spent some time at Stewart House Racing and was actually an engineer way back in his early days. And I'd love to hear more about that, Jim. But you spent an incredible, almost 8 years, at in the racing community here in the Charlotte area. I'd love to hear a little bit about your experiences and how you found yourself in the role. And I know you've got some interesting stories about COVID-19 and the focus that your organization had to make a shift at Joe Gibbs Racing. But welcome to the show. Give us a little bit of perspective on your role at Joe Gibbs.
Great, thanks. Appreciate the intro. Yeah, no, it's been a bit of a journey. I've been in motorsports for over 20 years. I went into racing immediately after getting a degree in mechanical engineering from Ohio State. And I wanted to make cars go fast and use my engineering degree to do that. And found myself, on pit road, engineering the cars and making the decisions on adjustments and calculating fuel and all that. And some of that job, a lot of it was data acquisition. So there's sensors on all the cars, and you got to connect to the loggers and download the data. And then it became this, like, I remember the day where I'm downloading the data and I'm standing there on pit road and I realize I've got 5 or 6 people looking over my shoulder. And you're kind of like, don't you guys have laptops too? And then what if I made a network here on pit road? And what if I found a place to deposit the data? And hey, I heard about this thing coming around and it's Wi-Fi. If I did that, then I wouldn't have to run all these cables. And you kind of get drawn into the IT and technology side. And as it progressed through racing, I found that there was a lot of people that wanted to be the guy that was making more horsepower, more downforce or whatever, but the IT systems just lacked. And it just constantly came in my face that if I could distribute the information more efficiently, if I could get more people looking at the data, if I could get this out of a spreadsheet and into a database. And the next thing you know, you're like, my title is engineer, but I'm doing IT stuff. And there was just a lot of opportunities within the sport to take that on and give the team a competitive advantage, whereas other areas like engineering, there were people beating at the door to take those roles, but nobody wanted to be the IT guy. So I kind of embraced that, and then it led me to an opportunity at Joe Gibbs Racing, and started out, really focused on their trackside infrastructure. And then after a year of that, we started talking, and it was, we have a chief marketing officer, we have a CFO, we have a CEO. Why don't we have a CTO? And why don't we make this a dedicated focus for our company? Because we see this as an area that we can make improvements and gains. So that was when I officially, 5 or 6 years ago, took over the CTO role at Joe Gibbs Racing, and assembled a team and got to work.
How did your engineering background help you in the role? I'm just curious about that. And by the way, do you still work on your own cars? Do you have that kind of expertise still?
It's funny. People ask that question a lot about, do you work on your own cars? And it's kind of like telling a banker, do you go home and count money? Like,
I know a lot of bankers who do that.
You spend so much time doing it at work that I personally, and some people aren't this way, but I personally choose other hobbies when I'm away from work.
That makes sense.
But to your first question, just the, engineering background, it's a problem solving skills that you learn in engineering, or problem solving skills that you use in IT. So I think that base skill set, transcends pretty easily. Problem solving, troubleshooting, all of that has to be done in engineering, and same with IT.
Jim, this is Mike. As a not a practitioner, right? Just from a work from home perspective, but it seems like there's, I've been in the technology industry for close to 2 decades, and it seems like there's a close correlation for me, from my perspective. My dad's big into cars, so I have a high appreciation of what you do. Growing up in the Rust Belt area, having family in Pittsburgh and family in Detroit and Chicago and Cleveland, right in that mecca, right? But it sounds like, based on, 60s, 70s, you're working on your own cars. A lot of people had that knowledge. And then there's that digital transformation within automotive where folks aren't working on their own cars anymore. They don't either have the time or expertise, but there's kind of that digital transformation. I think that for me as an outsider, there's a similar parallel in IT, right? Of kind of going to cloud, where it used to be, hey, people are working on everything themselves, and there's, kind of, hey, now I'm kind of managing some of these things. So from your perspective, being an expert in NASCAR and automotive, is there a similar path there that you've seen from automotive and kind of what they were doing in IT?
It's interesting point you make. I haven't really thought of it before, but I think you're right. My team in particular, we've built a managed services portfolio, and it's kept my direct headcount under control. And my approach is, I'm going to let the managed services folks do what they do well, which is kind of more of a lights on functionality. And then I'm going to assemble a team that is very focused on what Joe Gibbs Racing needs done, stuff that you just can't explain to a third party. So that allows my team to react. Racing can be very nimble. I mean, there's times when somebody comes up with an idea and thinks it's going to make the car go faster, and get on it. You have to react a lot. So that's allowed me to kind of build a team that, is very focused on our business needs and our goals and our competitive needs, and, use the managed service. So you end up not doing as much of the IT hands-on management of VMware stuff. So to your point, you're working on different stuff nowadays, because you got all these options in the cloud and with managed services, and it's definitely shifted.
You talk about problem-solving skills. I know that you've got an interesting story, which I've heard you tell before, about COVID-19 and the shift you guys made. I think it'd be really interesting for our listeners to hear more about what you experienced and how you use those problem solving skills to come up with a solution.
Yeah, in the month of April, my job title changed. I suddenly found myself making PPE and managing all that. But the way things got started, I had a neighbor. She put out on the neighborhood Facebook page one Thursday night, and she is ICU pulmonologist, and I won't name the hospital. It's one of the two big ones downtown. And she reached out and asked if anybody had anything in their garage, N95 masks, face shields, stuff like that. And it just sent chills down my spine. I thought, if the hospital downtown, which is where I'll probably get sent if I get this stuff, is asking for this from my garage, holy cow, what's going on here? So I called her the next morning, and she told me what was going on, and I made a concerted effort to get some stuff, but I found that people just don't buy the N95 stuff at Lowe's. They buy the stuff that's like dust masks because they're going to do some sanding. But the N95 costs twice as much, and it's kind of overkill for, woodworking. So all the masks that people had weren't good enough. And so it was like, well, she needs a face shield. Well, I got in touch with a friend of mine, and he said, hey, I know a guy, and he's been looking at printing these 3D printing these face shields on his small home $300 3D printer, and put me in touch with him. And I started talking with him, and this is on a Sunday, and realized, well, I've got 4 industrial grade 3D printers. Each one is probably a $300,000 machine, and they're sitting idle because our shop was shut down. We were considered non-essential. So doors were padlocked and lights were off and the whole facility. And so realized that, I got that at my fingertips, and we could print these. So we went ahead and got some prototypes to the doctor, and she said, yeah, this and that, and I'd like more coverage. And so Monday I got with our CEO, and I said, hey, I got this project. Can I have permission to take the full assets of Joe Gibbs Racing and get going on this? And he said his answer was hammer down, do it. So we went ahead and got going. We got the engineering department involved. They were on Microsoft Teams. As Teams has been pushing that ad where they have the COVID response team. Yeah, we did that, in Teams. We had a group of engineers working on changing the design, and ramping up production and figuring out faster ways to print so we could keep our volume up. And then meanwhile, this other guy that I originally got with and got the idea that was printing at home, he's just send me the files. I'll start making them too. And then he started getting the word out across the community. And, there's this little group of 3D printers out there that's a hobby for these people, and they talk. And he got that group going. So the next thing I know, I'm managing Joe Gibbs Racing's capacity and 9 people across Mecklenburg and Cabarrus County printing at home. I mean, we had high school kids printing, and we had people at home that were, they were getting up in the middle of the night to reload their machine. And it was a scary time because I was one step ahead of the spread of this virus, and just realizing, the one doctor I worked with, she says, I think we're going to be out by Friday. We're not going to have any more. And so there I am pushing to get her something Thursday night. It was that, like, we can't have any disruptions. And, first got a few to her, and I said, okay, how many do you need down there? And I'm thinking she's going to tell me 20. No, she needed 200.
Whoa, wow.
So I'm kind of like, okay. So we just started producing and organizing, and sure enough, before the deadline, you just were sitting there, and all of a sudden somebody from a home would call you and say, I got 15. I made 8. I made 9. Well, the numbers just added up, and the next thing I know, right before she said she was really going to be in bad shape, we gave her 220. And then one thing led to another. And then she says, well, I have a friend that works in the ICU out in Matthews. You think you could help them out? And then the next hospital and the next hospital. And it really, we branched out across the region. Like we started downtown and we started moving our way out as the virus made its way out. It was like we were, I think in the end, I estimate, we stayed about a week ahead of it. And we ended up supplying over 900 shields to just about every ER, ICU, and respiratory unit from Winston-Salem down to Matthews. And they're still using them. One of the things we did was, the reason they were having such issues is everything was designed to be disposable. And then when all these patients flood the system, they're throwing it away all the time. So we made ones that were reusable. We made it out of the right material. The face shield is made out of the same material. You have visors for helmets. So it's durable. It can be cleaned with chemicals without fogging up. And we just made it so the things would last. And makes me a terrible businessman because
Maytag, right?
They don't need, like I asked them a month or so ago, I said, how you guys doing? Do you need any spare parts? Nope, we're still using everything you gave us. I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely not in sales.
That's your SaaS model. It's just a rental model, right? It's your SaaS model, right?
Yeah. So the interesting thing was, fixing that disposable problem they had. It was like, they're going to throw these away. I can't pull this off continuously. And just kind of seeing firsthand what went on with the supply chain. And that was really enlightening. From the warehouse to the White House, they all screwed up, all of them. And the stuff, it was sort of amazing to me that this group of high school kids and myself and, there were a whole bunch of people at Joe Gibbs Racing that piled on and were helping and laser cutting material, and all this whole group just somehow came together and really bailed these people out. I remember Easter morning going down to one of the hospitals, and these people scurried out of the side door. The front entrance was barricaded, and you gave them the stuff, and they had tears in their eyes. And it was, the community came together. It was a grassroots thing. I refused to give anything to anybody that was in distribution. I said, no, you tell me the name of the head of the ICU. And I will. There was one guy, I found out he lived close to me. So for 3 nights in a row, every night I brought him over 75 face shields, and I gave them directly to him because I know he was going into work and going to hand them to the person that needed it. And did not have confidence in the people at the distribution warehouses were going to get that done. There was missteps that were going on where, the system in the hospitals had they'd never had orders that didn't get immediately filled. So you say, I need a box of gloves, and a box of gloves went out the door. Well, when they started to develop a backlog, the software had glitches where it wasn't prioritizing that this needs to go to the ICU and not pediatrics, and so it was whoever had the most recent request was getting their request filled. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not giving it to those people. You tell me who the head of the respiratory unit is, or who the head of the ICU or the ERs, and we will deliver directly to them. So that was very interesting, just seeing how that whole system worked, and then just trying to keep all the families' machines fed with material. And that things got really dicey in April, and somehow the material showed up. We never ran out, but the hospitals were unable to help us at all with getting material, and that was a little bit eye-opening as well. But we also ended up making, they called them COVID boxes, but that's basically clear Lexan boxes that they could put over patients' head as they intubated them. We made stuff like that. We made out of PVC, we made little tent, basically like tent frames where they could put medical plastic over a patient if they had to transport them to, if they had to take them from the ER up to the ICU, they needed a way to safely do that. And I remember telling the head of our chassis shop, I said, it's going to be like playing with Tinker Toys a little bit, but here's a little sketch, and you get some PVC and some PVC glue, and so that was what the head of our chassis shop was doing. You know,
I think it's a remarkable story, and it speaks so highly of Joe Gibbs Racing for giving you and the community an opportunity to leverage that skill and talent, at a time when we needed it. And I know that story still resonates through the community, and I know you got some really positive press as a result. I'm sure
it was when you engage the people at work, they're used to dealing with crew chiefs that say, I need it and I need it now. So when the doctors were saying that same thing, it was a natural transition for them. They just, okay, we're not building race cars right now. We're building this.
I imagine it gives you, a boost in your normal work life too, because now you've just proven you've solved problems outside of racing, using your ingenuity and creative skills. I'm sure there's some energy that you still feel from that whole experience. I can tell when you're talking about it that there's some positive energy there.
Oh yeah, certainly some satisfaction. There was a lot of people wanting to do something, and to get everybody able to do something, that felt really good for a lot of people that were involved.
You're transitioning back to racing. I'd just love to get, kind of an update on how has it changed? How active are you? What's it like these days? How are fans engaging? Just give us some perspective on kind of the state of the union as it relates to racing these days.
Yeah, so another thing I'm proud of is the fact that we were the first ones to go back to professional sports. And we realized that we needed to get the races in, but we needed to do it safely. And I remember the first race we did, they redid the entire schedule. Everybody, all bets were off. Everybody's got to be flexible. Everybody's got to be very fluid. We got to think out of the box. We got to figure this out. We got to get back because we need the revenue stream. That was our business model, was conducting races. So we were one of the very first to kind of come up with a COVID protocol. And I know when we did the first race, there was a lot of government officials watching us, and there was a lot of other major sports executives watching, like, how are they doing this? This is well before the NBA bubble had ever been thought of. And so one of the things we did was we decided to convert everything to one-day shows. So instead of going in on Friday and doing practice, and then Saturday doing qualifying, and Sunday doing races, we said, we're just going to do the race. And then that way we'll start locally, and we will make it so you could drive to the race. So we did Charlotte, a couple of events in Charlotte, and then we went down to Darlington, South Carolina, and just kind of tested, how is this going to go? Did we have any outbreaks? Nobody had to stay in a hotel. They all drove their own cars. So we just had to figure it out. And then we started that way. And then we tried to buy ourselves as much time as possible. We went up to Martinsville, Virginia. We went to Bristol, Tennessee, and tried to buy as much time before we had to put a group of people on an airplane. We immediately got involved. Novant is one of our sponsors, so they helped immensely. So we tapped into the experts at Novant to say, tell us what we need to do, and the masks and the temperature screening, and we were working on all that in the end of April. We still have a lot of people working from home. We're continuing to do that. I spend most of my time at home, and the main reason is the guys that got to go into the shop and got to go to the racetrack, I don't want to add any extra exposure to them, because if it affects them, it's going to be difficult. But we have protocols in place that when and if we have a positive test, we know what to do to keep it from shutting the whole company down. But the one-day shows has really reduced our costs as well. And so that has helped with the revenue, some of the revenue that we did lose because of COVID. It's helped with that. And everybody just kind of has to do things differently for businesses that haven't gone back full or gone into the office. And there's a certain level of anxiety that comes with that. I know we were very anxious when we went to do the first event. And am I going to do something wrong and get my hand slapped and get put in timeout, or not be able to go to work because I didn't fill out the right form, or all that? And only advice I can give to people that haven't experienced that, it's going to be okay. You know, if you make a mistake, all you got to do is correct it and get on board with the right protocol. But, you know, don't let oh, we're going back into the office and they're going to make us do this and this, and I'm afraid I'm going to forget to do something. It's not going to be the end of the world. You forget to do something and somebody says, hey, before you come in, you got to do a temperature check. I mean, next time do that, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, it's really a story of resilience, you know, your ability to succeed regardless of your circumstances. And I think that's a story that's timeless.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. How about fans? How are they engaging and how's that changed?
Yeah, it's been a bit tougher. We've done a lot of stuff online. You know, we have a big social and digital media group. And so we've seen a lot through iRacing, you know, video game racing and stuff like that. That's really taken off. And just interacting with the fans on social media, which was already a big part of our business, you know. Some fans don't want to go sit in the stands for 4 hours. They would rather experience the race on a tablet or a computer. And so that was already a big part of what we did. It's just kind of accelerated all of those efforts. And social media people aren't allowed to go to the racetrack anymore. So it gave them an opportunity to focus more on some of those initiatives, whereas before they might have been, you know, distracted by having to travel to the actual track and all the time that takes.
Makes sense. You can talk a little bit about, you know, cybersecurity, data privacy. I'm sure you guys have lots of proprietary information that you don't want to share with anybody outside of Joe Gibbs Racing. And what sort of challenges are you facing, and has COVID added to that complexity?
What's interesting for us is, yes, we have a lot of proprietary information, and we don't want our competitors to see that. And there's certain things we do, but one of the biggest things we have to protect is our brand. Our brand is what we sell. And if that gets damaged, it'll affect our revenue stream. So for instance, if an executive's email gets hacked and that sends something out to our sponsors and then their IT department, and these are Fortune 500 companies. We were talking, you know, FedEx, Coca-Cola, Stanley Black and Decker. So, you know, we can't expose those corporations to security issues from that standpoint. So it's very important that we protect our branding. So, you know, we've obviously, we're an Office 365 outfit, and we've fully adopted Microsoft's security set. And I emphasize fully adopted. You can't, you know, you can't a la carte it because you're just going to have holes. So we made that decision a few years ago, and that's really paid off. And then one of those projects this winter, which we already had going, you know, we were long overdue for MFA, and we went with Okta, and getting that done right before lockdown was like lucky, right?
I mean,
we knew we had to do it. We were overdue to do it. We finally got budgetary approval. The plan was to implement it in February, and we got it done. And I kept thinking of all these people now working from home and all of that. Man, I'm glad we got that done, and I'm glad we had the tools we have in place. But, you know, really protecting the brand is a big thing for us, you know, and not so much the design of the car or anything like that. It's our biggest thing. The Chinese, if they, you know, got into our system and found the drawings for a NASCAR, they're probably going to look at it and move on because it's of no monetary value, you know?
Point.
yeah.
There's not a lot of NASCAR in China, you're saying?
Yeah. So our big thing is, you know, protecting our brand from a security standpoint.
Speaking about brand, I mean, gotta ask you the question. I mean, working with a legend, you know, and Coach Gibbs and the family, is there one thing that kind of resonates and maybe how it's changed your leadership style, or it's changed how you do business in a positive manner? Is there, how has Coach Gibbs and the family rubbed off on you?
I think one of the biggest takeaways from Joe and both of his sons, JD, we lost about a year and a half ago, but they're all just, man, they don't give up, you know, and I think that resonates from the background and football and sports. But the tenacity that they have to get stuff done, you know, a lot of times when some people might run up against an obstacle and say to themselves, maybe I need to do something different. You know, they're we're going to go over it, around it, under it, but we're going to get this done. So that's a common thread with the Gibbs family, I think.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
just
from an
go ahead,
Indy,
Mike.
I'm sorry, from an Indy perspective, I know different racing, right? You were with, believe, Ray Hall in Ohio, and then coming down to the NASCAR. What's the biggest difference between those two types of sports? Even though it's still automotive, right, and racing, but I know that's very different styles, right?
Yeah, it is. One of the things I noticed, when I did IndyCars, there was a lot of the cars were very technologically advanced, and when you came to NASCAR, the cars were not as advanced technology wise, but that was dictated by NASCAR's rules package and the directives they had for the sport. But what I learned was there was a ton of technology off of the cars. So wind tunnel testing and shaker rig testing and the stuff that was going on away from the racetrack and the simulations and the computational fluid dynamics and all that stuff that was going on from an engineering standpoint that NASCAR can't police, right? It's not on the car. There was a ton of technology away from the car going on. So that was probably the biggest takeaway I had when I made the transition.
So what are the sort of the kind of the big nuggets that you see out in the future? What sort of things are you thinking about, down the road as it relates to racing and IT and the marriage of those two?
Well, I mean, I hate to use kind of a blanket term, but the digital transformation stuff has just accelerated big time. And, um, as headcounts reduced, we did have to furlough some people. And, I don't know if someone leaves, whether they get replaced or not in that department. So the tool sets to make people more efficient in their job. And that leads to digital transformation. I think in all industries, that's going to become more and more important, and especially as we spend more time working remotely and trying to navigate what that means. I think that those types of tool sets, whether it's obviously the video conferencing stuff has been big, but whether it's CRM, those types of tools. Um, ERP type of tools and those things so that everybody can get more efficient because let's face it, every business has been affected one way or another by this. And there aren't very many that have been affected positively as far as revenue streams go. So I think it's really going to push that digital transformation and the efficiencies that can bring to the table.
Yeah, great point. I think, in my circles, I talk to CIOs that are still resisting the idea that, there's more stuff available as a service, whether it's infrastructure, platform, or software as a service. And I think you've been one of those early adopter, proactive CTOs that has really adopted it. And I think one of the things I really liked about your comment at the very outset was that by doing that, you allow your team to really problem solve and help the company, deliver on the strategic value versus just the dial tone stuff that you can get from a third party who does it way better than any of us could because that's all they're doing. So I think that's a brilliant move on your part.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
What are you doing to kind of keep your teams together? I mean, Mike and I have talked to a bunch of different CIOs over the last 3 or 4 months. Lots of creative things. I don't hear as much about people having the Friday happy hours as much anymore. I think maybe that's sort of worn itself out pretty quickly.
We're having them every day, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Why I get limited to Friday? Yeah, I don't know that I've done anything superb in that arena. I mean, I immediately established a daily call check-in after lunch. And I thought that would go away eventually, but I've kept it. I think I got rid of the Friday one just so if anybody wanted to check out early, on a Friday, we do it Monday through Thursday. And, sometimes the calls are 10 minutes and okay, everybody, all right, talk to you tomorrow. And then other times it's an hour. and, just keeping that dialogue open so that if I can't tell you how many times I've seen, a couple of my guys, hey, I'm struggling with this, and oh, I know how to fix that. And you would have had that interaction in the office, right, in the past.
Yeah.
So to keep that dialogue going every day, even if sometimes it's like, we're only going to be on here for 10 minutes. I think that's been good. I also make an effort to just call my guys on the phone. The instant messaging and emailing and all that can get tiring, and just touch base with them, ask them how their family's doing. I think picking up the phone and making sure that you're a regular cadence, just talking to them on the phone, is important.
I've been feeling sort of a movement where people are trying to get back to a level of normalcy despite not being in the office. So I think the novelty of Zoom and all of that, Teams, it's kind of wearing off, and people are just wanting to get back to quasi-regular life, whatever that means.
I think that's why the virtual happy hour has gone away. If you spend 5 calls a day on Zoom, you really don't want to get on it after work's over.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Good.
Well, Jim, in regards to kind of how we wrap up the show, personal questions in regards to our Buckeyes. I mean, what are your thoughts around the college football season? I mean, you're kind of in the midst of things, right? I guess maybe I think your sport has a greater opportunity compared to football in regards to how you can properly social distance. But what are your thoughts on the Big Ten and college football? Some of the college football teams canceling versus some going forward.
Yeah, I just don't envy the people that had to make those decisions. One of the things I've learned is that it's way more complicated than everybody thinks it is, and all the partnerships that are going on in the background. And I hate to see the early decisions where it's just like, nope, not going to do it. I wish they had, and I'm not critical, because like I said, there's all stuff going on that I don't know on the back end that they got to deal with, but I wish they had paused and maybe said, let's see how this goes for a couple months. I know North Carolina High School Athletic Association basically did that. They said, we're not going to do anything this fall, but we're going to try to cram everything in after January 1. So they didn't just pull the plug, they adjusted. So I was a little disappointed to see some of the conferences just pulling the plug.
Yeah, I played Division III football and John Carroll up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was talking with the coach. We had a golf outing recently, and I was talking with the coach, and what they were doing is they're going to do less than half of a season so they can play in the spring, and everybody still stays eligible technically. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I know big time college football, they've got a lot of money, like you said, sponsorships and other things that they have to do. But I thought it was kind of interesting how they're trying to save the season, be safe, but also it doesn't impact eligibility now. Not too many Division III players are going to go pro. So definitely, apples and oranges, but certainly a different spin on things. And I liked how NASCAR did it, right? That they did it in regards to, hey, let's kind of crawl, walk, run, figure this thing out. That's a pretty neat concept.
Yeah, I mean, when we first schedule was, okay, it was like 6 races, and then anything after that, don't know. And I got to give credit to NASCAR's management team and our management team as well. Just everybody had to think out of the box, way out of the box. Everybody's got to be flexible. Everybody's got to concede something. Like, the track owners had to concede that they're not going to get revenue from fans coming to the track, but we're still going to get the race in. Everybody had to make some concessions to make it not be a complete loss.
In total team sport, right? I mean, it's like you said, you're even the hospital stuff that you're doing, you kind of took the pit crew mentality. Hey, I got to take you between the ICU, and the other departments. So pretty interesting. So in regards to, thanking you so much for what you've done for selfishly here in the community in Charlotte. So, hats off to you and the Joe Gibbs Racing team and kind of your 3D posse there, right? Kind of getting things going. Is there anything that you'd like to promote or let people know about, whether that's, Joe Gibbs Racing or things that you're doing, or anything that they can do to help?
I think at one point I mentioned, Joe had 2 sons, lost a son about a year and a half ago, JD Gibbs. He was the president of the company. And, they set up a foundation. You can go to jdlegacy.com. I encourage people to do that. I encourage you to take the time to read the story about, or listen to the story about JD and his life, and how he approached it. He was a pretty core figure for Joe Gibbs Racing and getting it going. And it's a really good message there, and it's a really good cause that legacy supports. So jdlegacy.com.
Excellent. We'll put that in the show notes for those of you who are driving in your cars or working out or doing however you're listening to the podcast or viewing it. But well, thank you so much, Jim. We Joe and I really appreciate having you on the podcast. I will certainly have to do it again. Hopefully this COVID stuff, maybe kind of get through this, but just all the things that you've done to put your fingerprints on this year. You've had a heck of a year so far, and we're only 8 months in. So hats off to you for everything you've done. And I love the hammer down thing. I think if there was an artist out there, a musician, I think it's a great song title, and talking about your story. So I could see it now. Maybe that's your days of thunder, so to speak.
Yeah.
Jim, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate all you've done for the community, as Mike said, and best of luck, and let's keep in touch. And I agree, let's have you on again here in the near future.
Great. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Jim, and go Bucks.
Yeah, go Bucks.